Welcome to Glazed Over, a podcast for contemporary ceramic studios. We're your host, Jessica Cowan.
And Amy Williams. You're invited to join us in creative conversation about life in the arts as entertainment space.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Amy. How's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing super fantastic. It's a Tuesday morning right now.
Is it?
See, that's how fantastic I'm doing. I have no idea what day it is, but I do know that we just had a really fantastic conversation with Katie Magoon on HR and recruiting resources. So that's been a really good time.
Yeah, we talked about employee handbooks. We talked about attendance policies, termination best practices. I mean, we really got into it. I asked and we got an answer to, I think, the most important HR question in Paint Your Own Pottery. So you'll have to listen to hear what that is. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a good one. I'd not met her before, had you?
No, I hadn't met her before either, but yeah, she was a wealth of knowledge. And if you attended my class at convention last year, you will recognize that she's similar to me in that she just has the information and goes at it. So be prepared to listen and take notes whenever you get into this episode. And just so you know, we did ask about bringing your people to convention and what that will be like. So you'll get some information on that as well if you're still kind of up in the air on who we should bring or if you should bring anyone at all.
Yeah, and at the very end, Katie mentions that if you reach out and ask her a question and reference that you have listened to this episode, she will get on a call with you for free, which is extremely generous. And I'm
So
hoping that
generous.
our people will take advantage of that. So, yes, enjoy the episode, and we'll see you and maybe a staff member of yours at convention.
Yeah, y'all enjoy.
Hey everyone, Des Toll here from Biscuit Imports. You know how much we love our customers, and supporting the CCSA podcast is just one more way we can show up for you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. We're glad you're here.
Feel like a juggler at your ceramic studio? Between classes, bookings, and admin tasks, those pins keep flying. Let Occasion help you put down the act and get back to creating. Visit occasion.act to discover your peace of mind.
Looking to boost your cash wrap sales and leave a lasting impression? For Art's Sake, stickers are the perfect add-on. Whether it's artistic animals, playful pottery puns, or fun color your own designs, there's a perfect sticker for everyone. Shop now at forartsakestickers.com or at the CCSA annual convention this fall.
How long have you been in HR, Katie?
So I have been in HR my entire career. I tell folks
Wow.
that like the day I graduated college, my father and I were sitting at lunch and he said, so this HR thing, like somebody's going to pay you to do this, right? I was like, yes, this is an actual real career path. It will serve me well. So started right out of college, have been in HR my entire career, mostly in corporate until about 9.5 years ago, which I guess isn't as mostly anymore as it used to be. But 9.5 years ago, I had the opportunity. I was with Progressive Insurance at the time. I was their director of claims and contact center. And it was really time to kind of make that next career change. And I was on the recruiting side. I really wanted to get back to like my roots of true like HR generalist, employee relations, strategy type of work. And I looked up and said, I've always wanted to start my own consulting firm. There were a million reasons not to. All of those had kind of changed. And so I called my boss on January 4th and said, starting my own company and I'm leaving in 30 days. And so here we are 9.5 years later. I have a team of 8. And we're in like we work with clients in 38 states and Canada and some in the Bahamas. Like we've done a lot of different things. So it's been great.
I have to ask, are you the HR person for your HR consulting company?
So that's a really interesting question. I actually have a colleague. Thankfully, I haven't had to do nearly as much HR. Like my team has been in really good shape. And I often will use like our internal HR projects I use as development opportunities for my team. So if I need to, do a handbook, I assign it to my person who's not done handbooks before, and we use it as an internal opportunity. But externally, I have a colleague that if I get into one of those more dicey situations where I too need a sounding board, I use her for those moments.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very cool. I mean, many of us in the PYOP play industry, we are the owners, we are the managers, we are the HR leads. So
Yeah.
this is a really, I think, important episode for us.
Yeah. And
Where,
most of my clients are small to mid-sized businesses who are big enough to need HR help, but not big enough to have somebody full time. And so we work as sort of fractional HR in those situations. And so we're the phone the friend line of like, oh my, they just did this. What do I do? We create handbooks for our clients. Like, so we don't just do big companies. Most of my clients are actually smaller businesses.
Yeah, that's great to know. So where should we begin talking
Yeah.
about, this episode is kind of like, great tips to know within HR, and where should we start?
I think one of the most common places to start in this conversation is as a small business, right? Or even if you've got a team of people, you likely don't have a lot of administrative people. And so when you're going it alone, right, what are the things that you do need to make sure are taken care of? What matters? And right, there's a whole like HR can grow like a piece of rice in water, but what's really going to make a difference to your organization, and what are some of those when we come in and work with companies, what do we usually like find under those rocks that people may not realize are problematic?
Yeah, and what are you finding?
Yeah. So first one, especially in this space, is employee handbooks is an important piece to it. It's really key to have one, first of all. When I was in corporate world, you heard myths about companies not having them, and you were like, I'm sure that's not true. And then I started working. One of my very first clients was a company of 80 people. They had been in business for 40 years and they did not have an employee handbook. And I was like,
Whoa.
Wow.
how are you operating? Like, how do people know? And people think of employee handbook in terms of like, you need it because of legal. And yes, you do. But more importantly, it's really about how do you set that culture that you want. And so we really try to come at handbooks from a culture perspective of like, how do you want your business to operate? And the only way then to capture that and share that with your current team, and more importantly, your extended team, is to actually write it down. But honestly, most of the time when we're working with clients on a new handbook, the value is in the upfront conversation, not in the document that they get at the end. Because when we ask things like, so what's your bereavement policy? And they look at us like, I didn't have one. They're like, well, I don't have one. And you're like, okay, that's great. Let's think now when you're not in the moment of having to deal with this really difficult thing about what would you do? And everybody tends to go with like, well, I won't pay anybody, right? But then that happens, and immediately it's the employee who's been with you, of course, for 5 years. And your natural reaction is to be like, well, take whatever you need. Well, that's the right answer, but it's super vague. And if whatever I need is a month off, now 2.5 weeks in, the owner's like, well, I said take what you need, but I didn't mean that. And what do I do? Right. So taking time to think about those things up front can be really helpful. And so even like example of challenges, sometimes people will say, I don't want to pay for bereavement, or I don't want to pay, I'll give them everybody a day. Well, I'm sorry. If your spouse passes away, no boss in the world is going to be like, you get one day. Like that's just not going to happen. So you have to come up with answers to those questions that in the moment you're going to be willing to live with, because if your handbook is all these things that you say you're going to follow, but you don't, then you don't have a handbook to start with. And people are still walking around going, well, we ignore it every time something important happens. And so I think that's changing the mindset around employee handbook being just something you copy off of the internet and say, I have this legal document, and really thinking about how do you want your business to operate, even in the situations you would never expect, really helps people kind of wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different than Jess. Jess has a traditional studio. She has customers coming to her. I was in a paint your own pottery for 10 years, and I am just a solo person selling my stuff online.
Okay.
But I need to hire someone, and I have been kind of putting off updating my employee handbook because it is so intimidating, and it is such an undertaking. And is there I'm thinking about it sort of as like an outline. What major things would you hit in this employee handbook if you are like me, who needs to update it slash sort of make it from scratch, or if you're
Yeah.
like someone that just is looking at theirs and think, oh, I'm missing, I have this hole that I need to fill.
Yeah. So a couple of things matter. First of all, how many employees you're talking about makes a difference. There's a big difference between what legal things you need to put in if you are 1 to 5 people versus if you're 15. 15 is kind of your first magic number in employee handbook world in terms of you start getting into federal laws at that level. So Americans with Disabilities Act starts making a difference at that level. That's probably the biggest one. 5 employees for most states is where some of your legal stuff will start to happen. Many states have, like Missouri has a Missouri Human Rights Act that covers all of the things that Title VII and the federal laws cover, but they don't cover you until you're at 15 people. Missouri Human Rights Act starts at 5. So an employer that does something they shouldn't, who's sitting at 4 employees, your legal risk is very different in some states than others. It doesn't mean you don't need a handbook, but what you need in there is important. And the legal side is important because you don't want to put something, this is where people, when you try to just Google it and, or use AI for it, this is where people get into trouble. You don't want to put something in your handbook that holds you accountable to a law that you're not actually accountable for, because if you do, now you're accountable for it. So if I take an Americans with Disabilities Act section off of the internet and I put it in my handbook for my 4-person team, I'm not legally required to follow the ADA, but I am now that I put it in my handbook. So those are the kinds of things that we help navigate to make sure that you don't get and these don't have to cost a fortune to have somebody else do it, but the peace of mind of those kinds of things. So that's one. The state and local laws is the other piece that I find people, they take something from their neighbor, right? They're like, oh, well, I borrowed this from this person in Indiana. Well, great, but Indiana law and Missouri law is very different. And particularly, I would say in the last 10 years in particularly, state employment laws have started to vary even more so. And in really big, some of them in really big ways, like whether or not somebody can even be considered a contractor versus an employee is different in about, I think we're up to about 8 or 9 states. Like somebody who is a contractor in those 8 or 9 states, or in most states, might not be able to be a contractor and need to be an employee in 8 states. So there's a lot of nuance to it. A lot of states are starting to put in paid sick leave laws. So you are required to provide paid sick leave in, I think we're close to 15 or 16 states now. The other one is whether or not you pay out unused PTO. It varies state by state. And in some cases, county by county. That's a little less common, but you see it in a couple of key places. So those are the kinds of things that you need to understand how many people you have and what that means. You need to understand what state you're in and what that means legally. And then you really need to think about decisions you make on your employees. And this is where the culture piece comes into play. And this is things like attendance policies, right? People often will want their attendance policy to be, I want a point system. If you're late one day, it's a half a point. I had somebody who was like 10 minutes late is a quarter of a point, 30 minutes late is, and I was like, oh, you'll drive yourself nuts, right? Because eventually you're like, well, what if they're 28 minutes late, right? So they overcomplicate things. And so you really need to think about what are you trying to accomplish with your policies? And how do you get there in a way that isn't going to drive everybody crazy, including you as the owner? Other policies besides attendance that are important. Dress code is always dicey for people. What's the balance between I tell you you can wear green shirts, red shirts, and yellow shirts, but not black shirts, right? Versus tell people to dress professionally and dress appropriately. So finding that right balance is important. The other ones, things like bereavement policy can fall under that. Jury duty is one of those, right? A lot of companies are like, well, we support jury duty, but if you get called for jury, we're not going to pay you. Or the other one in jury duty I love is, we support you doing jury duty. You will pay you for 3 days, up to 3 days. But if you get a check from your jury duty, then you have to like submit it. You have to turn it in.
which
Check
is like
for a day of
$10.
jury duty now is like, I
Yeah.
served on a jury for 2 weeks. It was like a
No.
long time, but 2 full weeks, like it was like $8 a day. I think it basically covered my lunch at a really bad Kentucky Fried Chicken down the
Ew.
street from the courthouse. So, it's those kinds of things that when you read them on paper, you're like, yes, that's what I want to do. And then you put it into practice and you're like, this is really bad.
Yeah.
So just it's those kinds of things that you need to be thinking about. From a legal perspective, some of the ones that you need to have, regardless of your size and things like that, are things like a sexual harassment policy,
Mm.
a complaint procedure, right? What do I do, particularly if I feel like there's discrimination or harassment? Who do I tell? And how will it be handled? Those are all big ones to have in there. And then, but like I said, the rest of these are really about like, how do you want to manage day to day? And are you really going to feel good about what that means?
Yeah. So I imagine you especially if you're new to the employee handbook space, some of this stuff will need to be changed as you work through them. How often can you be updating your employee handbook? I would imagine as an employee, I would be exhausted if every other week you were like, well, changes to the handbook, so like what is there any rules around that?
There's not formal rules, there's more best practices. So, particularly while you're growing, there's a couple. One, you have to be really aware of key numbers in employment law. So, that 15 number, there's a
Mm.
few that kick in when you hit 25. There's big ones when you hit 50. So, I have a couple of clients that are at like 42 employees, and I'm like, look, if you're going to grow next year, when you start hitting
Mhm.
47, be really, really intentional about whether or not you want to go over 50 or not, because there's expense related to the over 50 that people don't realize makes a difference. So I have a couple of employers that are intentionally staying at 48 people. Like they're like, we are not going over that bar. So that's one of the things, like how often depends on how quickly you're growing. For this group, right, you're probably not doubling your staff in a year. It's probably a couple of people here or there. I typically suggest then review your handbook at least every 12 to 18 months, because in that 12 to 18 months, laws can change, and most importantly, in addition to laws, court cases can change things. So
Mm.
people often forget to follow that. They watch the news and they hear the flashy, like, ooh, this was all over that Missouri passed this
Mhm.
law, right? But the reality is court cases make as much of a difference as anything. And so even last year, when there was talk that the Fair Labor Standards Act was going to change, and the hourly rate or the salary that you needed to be at to be exempt from overtime, right? Like that was a big deal. And I mean, it would have made a big difference had that gone into place. Everybody watched and said like, well, they passed the law. Well, then everybody stopped, all our small businesses stopped watching as it went through the courts. And then lo and behold, it gets to the courts and it gets stopped. So you've got to, you need to be paying attention to all of those. And more importantly, just every 18 months, something's going to happen that you need to kind of update things for.
Yeah.
So my question with the handbook is, where is the best medium to have it? Because we talk about handbooks a lot as studio owners, and a lot of us are talking about operations. I love this conversation about the legal side of it, which I think brings up the next part is how do we get it in front of people in a way that protects all of us?
Absolutely. So first of all, you should like we're still in an age where giving everybody a hard copy when they start and being like, "Hey, let's sit down and go over this." Like
Mhm.
that makes a difference. You don't want to just be like, "Hey, sign it," because people will turn to the last page and it'll be signed. But if you
Mhm.
take handbooks out of just legally, I checked a box and think of it more in terms of, I want to set this person up for success for operating in my day to day, the conversation that goes with it is super important. One of the things that we've done with clients to make that easy, because it is hard to every new time somebody starts, you're like, I got to sit down and meet on the handbook again. It gets away from you. You can easily record them on videos. So we've even had folks like roll it out where I'm doing one this afternoon where I'm going to roll it out to the team, but we're going to record the conversation so that new hires, when they come on, not only will they get the hard copy, but they'll hear somebody walking them through it. If you have the ability to do it, and actually this is a best practice in the first place, is there are HRIS systems, which are human resources information systems, that now will support electronic versions of the handbook. You can even store a video in there as training, so people have to like check that they've watched it. But also they will allow for it to be done via electronic signature. So you can set it up so that on their first day as part of onboarding, they're going to get this email that says, here's the employee handbook, and they have to read it and sign off on it. That's probably the easiest way to store all of these. And there's one of the ones I often recommend is Bamboo HR. Very user friendly, very easy to configure. I don't get anything from Bamboo for saying that. We just know they're really good. We use them, and I would say probably half of our HR clients are using Bamboo. And the other piece, because having an HRIS system, people sometimes think of it as fluff. It actually is really helpful in managing your HR processes from beginning to end. It's a secure place to store all of the documents you need, your I-9s, your tax forms, right? All of that. It does integrate with payroll systems, so you can have it all flow together. They have a pay time off process to do it. But they also have some cool things like a training tab where one of the best practices to do if you're going to take the time, and when I say video, you don't need high-end video. Jump on Zoom and hit the record button, works just fine. But they can, or Loom is another tool that a lot of our clients have done. Some people, for their policies in their handbook that they know people refer to frequently, they will actually not just record, here's the overview of the whole handbook, but like, hey, here's our dress code. Let me talk to you as the owner, get on and record. Here's our dress code, and here's the spirit of it. Here's what I'm trying to get to, which is much more enticing for people to pay attention to than the cold words on a piece of paper. And so that's one of the reasons I like the idea of, you can use small snippets, but if you can have an owner, not just, you don't want them to like get on Zoom and read the handbook to them, but talk about like, why did you make the decision you made? Now you're really going to influence behaviors for employees versus, well, the policy says that, but I don't think they actually mean it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
understanding
one
that
option,
why.
Jessica, is kind of recording those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessica, where do you store yours?
Everywhere. I mean, we have a hard copy of it, and then I've got an online one as well that comes with quizzes and whatnot to keep it together. But I personally love a hard copy. We actually piece ours out, not the legal side of it, but the operation side. Everyone gets a chunk of it to go through every few months, and we update it at the beginning or in March. It's not the beginning of the year. March is when we do our updates, but in the fall, everyone will get a section of it to kind of highlight, edit what's changed operationally. Then I go back and look at the legal stuff that's changed, and then we do our update in the spring before everything gets crazy for the summer.
Yeah. Jessica, you brought up a good point. Our recommendation is actually have the handbook side and the operation side separate. And let me clarify what I mean by operations, because everybody has their own version of that,
Yeah.
right? If you're talking about like procedures for here's how we open the shop in the morning, here's how we close it, those you want in an operations manual, and you want those separate because they are likely to change more frequently. They're also likely to be more, here's our best practice, not it's a policy, right? The handbook is really for things that are, hey, as an employee, here's how I want you to, this is what you can expect from me as an employer, and here's what I expect from you as an employee. And the reason you want those two things separate, one, the operation side is definitely going to change more frequently than the handbook. So to Amy's point, right, like you're not gonna be driving everybody nuts doing it. But the other reason is you are far more likely to be like, all right, they didn't quite follow our operating procedures, but it's not something they're in trouble for over here. But every time you sort of wave off, like, I know our handbook says that, but I'm not worried about that. Every time you say that, you put the legal risk of your employee handbook in jeopardy. And so you want to be careful that those are kind of two separate pieces.
Right. But they do go together. So, I mean,
Yeah,
everyone's
you
got to
can
have
actually
access
have
to the
one as the,
information.
yeah.
So I think that's the part that Amy was asking me about, I guess.
Yeah, no,
How do people
absolutely.
get it,
I'm
you know?
clarifying that less for you and more like I hear that a
Yes.
lot. I have had handbooks where like 3 pages of the employee handbook is how do you fill out the expense report form, right? And
That's
that's
crazy.
going to get overwhelming.
Yeah.
Typically what I will suggest is think about if you're, for folks that are in that spot, think about maybe it's an appendix, right? Maybe the operations side goes as an appendix, or just have separate standard operating procedures and then have the like, here's how I want you to act stuff in the handbook. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like things like your start and end time, that should absolutely be an employee handbook. That's not operations, but detailed steps on things are the parts that we always
Mhm.
suggest that people break out into something separate.
I'm trying to play it cool and be like, I'm absolutely not intimidated by this employee handbook that I need to refresh, if not start from scratch. Like, how do you know when it's done?
Yeah. I would actually tell
It's never
you,
really done.
I was gonna say it's never really done. Should get. I always tell this story. I have a really good friend that every year, it's kind of like a resume, right? Every year she used to sit down on New Year's Day and update her resume. Well, if you do it every year, it takes you 10, 20 minutes, right? If you wait 3 years, well, now it's a 3 week project if you sat down and like really focused on it. So some of it is just being engaged with it often enough that you
Mhm.
realize when does it need small massaging versus waiting until it's a big lift and a big overhaul.
Yeah.
And that can happen even as you're like I just had a new hire start in April and I sat down and I went over the employee handbook with her and I was like, ooh, a couple of things here that we've adjusted, right? We got bigger, we changed some things, time to update it. So it's never done, but it's a lighter load every time.
Yeah.
Like when we update
I feel
ours
like
for
that
our
happens to me
clients
every
every
time that
18.
we hire.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, we changed that. Like
Yeah.
actually. So make an adjustment.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned this earlier. We're talking about the attendance policy, and this is something that I think, our industry, I think any customer service industry struggles with this. But, can we talk about what you recommend for attendance policies and maybe why it's not the point-based system? Because that sounds difficult.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. That is probably my biggest, like when clients come to us and they have point-based systems, the first thing I recommend is like, let's get rid of that,
Mm.
right? Because it does, one, it's super hard to track.
Hmm.
Two, it's easy, it's hard to track, but it's easy for people to find loopholes with, which is
Yes. Well, it's
problematic.
and it's kind of condescending. I don't know. It feels
It
like a
is.
little
I was gonna,
kiddie.
Like you're
culturally,
moving your clip down from the
Yes.
red
Red
light,
light. Yeah.
green light to red
yeah,
Yeah.
light.
yeah. Culturally, they don't set well with people.
No.
Hmm.
We actually recommend a fairly open attendance policy, not open like your choice whether you come, but our verbiage is look, if you aren't here, you can't be performing your job.
Yeah.
It's as easy as that, right? So if, we understand things happen, but being here, it is an essential part of the job is being here, especially in the retail space, right? Like work from home isn't an option, so you need to be here. And particularly being there on time is an important part of the job because other people are impacted. Your clients are impacted, your employees are impacted. And so I actually prefer to take attendance not from but it's a performance issue. If
Mm.
this is a performance problem, and when you do that, then it gets less about, well, was it 3 times or was it 4 times? And when do I do it? And more
Mhm.
about, is this causing a performance problem? The other reason that is helpful is for clients who might be big enough that they have 15 people and the Americans with Disabilities Act comes into play, or local laws along paid sick leave time and so forth. It helps you navigate those a lot more easily. For example, when Missouri just passed their paid sick leave law, and their law says, you have to provide up to 40 hours of sick leave a year for people. And two, you can't retaliate against people for taking it. So if you think about what that means to your attendance policy, the first 40 hours you take can't count at all towards a trend in your attendance because you're legally allowed to take it and I can't retaliate. So it flips like that. It was interesting. All my owners were like in Missouri as this was rolling out, were like, well, what are we going to do? Because this is going to cost me so much money. I'm like, well, I'll be honest. The 5 days is like the 5 days of pay is not going to be your problem. Your problem is going to be how frustrated you are when somebody has taken 5 days off and you think you can manage the attendance and you can't. And
Right.
so we really, so I tend to come at it from in the perspective of, look, you can't be performing your role if you're not here. So excessive attendance or being late, is problematic and will be managed as a performance issue. And now you have the flexibility to start, like it doesn't, your policy doesn't lock you in so tight that you can't deal differently with the person who truly like has a major illness and is like, gosh, I'm not covered by any state law, but I'm really sick these 3 days. And it doesn't count against me the same way as the person who comes in 30 minutes late every Saturday.
Are you spending hours managing studio bookings and class registrations? Occasion helps ceramic studios save an average of 3 days a week in admin time. With clever workflows, instant confirmations, and seamless class management, you can focus on what matters, creating amazing experiences for your customers. Join successful studios like Clay Cafe Avalon, who've trusted Occasion since 2016. Visit occasion.app and schedule a demo today. Mention Glazed Over Podcast for personalized setup support.
Hey, podcast pros, give yourself a high five for tuning in and leveling up your business game. Seriously, we see you. Here at Biscuit Imports, we're all about helping studios like yours thrive. From our ever-growing lineup of awesome bis shapes to a huge library of resources, videos, and tools, we're here to make your job easier and keep those customers coming back for more. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned studio superstar, we've got your back. Let's keep the creativity flowing, the kilns burning, and the good vibes rolling. Check us out anytime at biscuitimports.com. We're here to help you grow, shine, and succeed.
I have had situations in a manager role where, our closer is working by herself and the shop closes at 9 o'clock, but she's not clocking out until 10:30 because she's cleaning and going through the task list and everything. And everyone else can do it in half an hour or so. How do you handle the thing of like, yeah, we want you to do your job, but we want to do it like there are boundaries or within reason. What's the language around that?
Absolutely. That's another one where I would come at it from a performance perspective, right? Like she might be doing a great job, but is she doing it effectively and efficiently?
Mm.
And so the expectation, if everyone else is getting it done in 30 minutes to the level of expectation, then you sit down and have the conversation and say, hey, walk me through. Like on average, I'm seeing most folks are getting through the checklist in 30 minutes. It looks like it frequently takes you an hour and a half. What challenges are you running into? What's keeping you from being able to do this in 30 minutes? And all because it might be she thinks she's doing an extra special job, right? And you might not care about the extra specials. So, where is she putting in her mind sprinkles on top to make things better? And you're like, well, but I don't want you to be here for an hour and a half. Because employees don't always think about the fact that that hour and a half means you've got an expense you didn't plan for. So I typically in that case sit down, start from a like, walk me through, tell me what's happening, and figure out what's behind it, and then be really clear on the expectation. Is from a performance perspective, my expectation is that this takes 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
And
figure out together what that takes. And then if she continues to be an hour and a half, then you sit down and say, you're not effectively performing your role because these tasks should be done in 30 minutes, not an hour and a half. And now you go down the performance management route.
and what's the best way to document this conversation?
Absolutely. So I typically suggest if it's the first discussion, just write an email to yourself, right? If it's the first conversation and you just want to make sure that you have something that remembers what you said and how you said it, just sit down, write an email to yourself, hold on to it, or write a Word document to yourself. That's an easy way to do it. If you have an HRIS system like Bamboo, a lot of those systems have places within them that you actually can keep your notes in there. In terms of when you go that next step to the performance management side of the house, a very basic form that says like, here was the problem, like here's the issue we addressed, here's the expectation going forward, and having the employee sign it. And make sure that when you have them sign it, I always use the language that you're acknowledging receipt of this information. You're not acknowledging that you agree with it or that you will do it, but you're acknowledging that you've received the information. That's kind of a big piece of it. And then have them sign that piece of it.
Yeah.
Usually
That
I
makes
say
sense.
like have one or two conversations about it first and then start the like here's your piece of paper process, unless it's a big issue, right? Where somebody, yelled at a customer in front of a whole studio full of people or something like that, where you would be doing, hey, if this ever happens again, that's it. Those you want to put in front of people right away.
Mm. Well, that kind of leads us into disciplinary stuff, I think. Is it
Mhm.
3 strikes, you're out? Or is it more nuanced?
It's a lot more nuanced. And I've had people use that terminology, 3 strikes, you're out. And I'll be honest, it can be problematic because
Of course.
if you say 3 strikes, you're out, but then that third strike happens and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is not the thing, right? I had a client recently who kind of, they had always followed a 3 strikes policy before us, and they called, and we hadn't even been working with them long enough to know that. And they called and they're like, okay, I told this person 3 strikes are out. And I think it was around, it might have even been about like attendance or something really basic, right? And the employee on the way to work gets in a car accident, and a
Oh, no.
serious enough car accident that an ambulance takes them to the hospital. The employee showed up the next day with their uniform and like handed it over and said, I know you said my third strike, I'm out. So like, here's your stuff. And the owner's
Oh,
like,
crazy.
there's no way I'm going to fire you. You were in the
Right.
hospital, right? So
Oh,
when we get like some people will be really literal, and then of course the person you want to take it literally doesn't. So
yeah.
inevitably they're like, but I thought you meant five. You're like, that's not
Yeah.
how this works. So I think that's so typically what I suggest is in fact, when we write handbooks, we don't, there used to be a best practice that a lot of attorneys would say, like put in there that you will get a verbal warning, a written
Mhm.
warning, a final written warning, right? And
Yeah.
spell it out. The current advice from attorneys is leave that more broad, leave that broader, and
Mhm.
say, there will be progressive conversations when appropriate around performance related issues. That way, if you've given the verbal warning and the second time they do something, it's the same thing, but it's significantly more, like more impactful. You don't have to be like, oh, but I can't terminate them because of this. You haven't locked yourself into that, because sometimes people escalate something way faster than you're like, wow, that really changed the course. So I usually just suggest that you say we have whenever possible, we follow a progressive discipline process. Our focus is around providing you coaching and feedback to
Yeah.
ensure that your behavior matches what we're looking for. Now, in general practice, yes, the best outcome, and not because of legal, but because costs a lot of money to hire people, and you don't want to lose them because you've decided everything has to be perfect
Mhm.
all of the time. So a culture in which the first step is always, let's have a coaching conversation.
Mhm.
And coaching conversation isn't, you did this wrong, don't do it again. But just like I said in the prior example, right? Walk me through like what's causing you this challenge? What's
Yeah.
what's happening here? Because there's often things that we just don't realize somebody is struggling with. And if we had a little bit more information, we might be able to either adapt for them, or we might have advice for them, or we might be able to pair them up and retrain them on something. So typically I start with, walk me through what happened. Tell me why this is difficult for you. What do you need from us, right? If that then, right, hopefully that results in some clear plans on what we do. The key is, and this is the part where people drop the ball a little bit, is after you've had that conversation, you need to note on your calendar, like 30 days out, stop and
Mhm.
think about, have we actually seen improvement? Because sometimes we get so into our day to day that unless it blew up big, you might not have noticed that it's been a death by a thousand cuts along the
Yeah.
way,
Mhm.
and you haven't addressed it. And so you do need to kind of mark that calendar for 30 days to ask yourself, like, all right, nothing bad has happened, like nothing horrible has happened, but has it actually gotten better? And particularly when you're talking about performance, if I use your example about the person who's taking a long time to close, right? Well, if they're if they're improving a bit and you're seeing it more at like 45 minutes or an hour, you might not, it might not catch your attention because it's not going to catch it until you read the time card and you go, what do you mean an hour and a half again, right?
Right.
But the
Hmm.
little, the 15, 20 minutes here, you might overlook. And so if you looked back at the end of 30 days and went, wow, they're not doing an hour and a half, but it's still consistently taking them 50 minutes. We're not any, like, we're not where we need to be. Now it's going to flag you. So making a point to mark your calendar to be like, step back and look at the forest for the trees in 30 days or 60 days, can keep this kind of roller coaster pattern from happening, which is most commonly the challenge when you're disciplining people.
Yeah. And let's say we're out 30 days or out 60 days and, you know, it hasn't changed and maybe it's gotten worse. And I know it varies state by state, but let's say it's time to terminate someone. What are the steps that we need to go through to do this, not only legally, but in a way that we can feel good about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually tell you 9 times out of 10, the second half of that is far more important than the
Yeah.
first, especially with the organization, like with companies in this organization,
Hmm.
right? You're not going to be, many of them are not covered by the big federal laws because they're not 50 employees, right? Many, as I've worked with your groups before, a lot of folks are less than 5, certainly less than, 10 to 15. So the legal piece, important, yes, but the treat people with respect, because it impacts not only that person, but quite honestly, it impacts the whole rest of your team.
Yeah.
So it's really important. So let's start with that piece of it. First and foremost, sometimes it truly is about, no matter how frustrated you are with this person, stepping back and taking a deep breath and recognizing, you know what, no matter what, this is a human being and we can't assume ill intent. Doesn't mean they shouldn't, like they shouldn't be leaving your
Mhm.
team, but we don't come at termination from a place of anger.
Yeah.
I've terminated people for theft before, and you still don't come at it from a place of anger.
Yeah.
Almost every person I came from HR and banking and early on in my career. So I've had to terminate a lot of people for embezzlement in my time frame. And those are actually some of the saddest stories when it comes to the termination meaning, because people mostly don't steal from companies because they just
Because they
thought
want
it
to.
sounded like fun, right?
Hmm.
Something was
Right.
going on in their life. Stories of children that were sick and you can't financially, like the stories are heartbreaking and they're always from the person you didn't expect it from. So they're really heartbreaking. So we have to remember that whatever has happened, this is still a human being on the other side. So bring down the temperature in the room. Then you need to build a plan for the conversation. Too many people go in and just are like, okay, so you're like, we're terminating you. There needs to actually be a plan beforehand. And that plan includes, first and foremost, script out what you're going to say. Now, that doesn't mean you take your phone and you read it from the script. I've had it happen.
Oh.
But when you write, like, it's a nerve-wracking thing to do. Most employers tell me the morning they have to fire somebody, they're like, I just want to throw up. And I'm like, yes, I know you do. I kind of do too sometimes, but that's okay. But when you write it out, you start to pick language that will sound respectful,
Yeah.
right? You watch those words of, you take out the words of blame, you take out, like, you just soften your message when you write things out from beginning to end. So, and also then you can practice and make it less scripted, but stay on point. So you don't end up, nobody wants to sit in a termination meeting for a long period. And that's probably one of the mistakes we see people make is the termination meeting is like, I'm going to tell you for 30 minutes everything you ever did as to why I'm terminating
Oh
you.
my
No, nobody wants to sit through that,
God.
right? The person in that seat wants out of that seat as quickly as they
Hmm.
possibly can.
Hmm.
So thinking about that and thinking about how long would it take us to get through this conversation and what can wait, right? What doesn't need to be rehashed? How do I say what I need to say? Let them out of the room. I can always go over, like, touch on final paycheck and those kinds of things, but don't spend 30 minutes discussing it, right? You
Yeah.
can always call them. They're not going to remember what you said anyway, nine
No.
times out of 10.
Yeah.
So write it out, think about all of those kinds of things. The other thing is think about all of the things that you do need to take care of. Some states are require that you give them, give a terminated employee their final paycheck that day, and direct deposit won't work, because direct deposit takes 2 days to get to their account. And those states say, doesn't count. So you've got to have a physical check ready. You've got to be prepared for that. If you're big enough and you need COBRA paperwork, right? Like you need to be prepped for those kinds of things. So thinking that all through. Also thinking about the room setup. Where are you going to do this? If you're in a studio and there's a wide open space, like the table in the corner isn't going to be appropriate. So what time are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? Who's going to be around? So that for safety and security perspective, right? But also for the dignity of the person, little things like, guess what? People cry during terminations.
Yeah.
And if we go into a termination meeting with the knowledge that the goal is to let this person out of their role and out of the organization with as much dignity and respect as they can possibly manage, Kleenex matters, because there is nothing about this that reads dignity and respect, right? If I don't have a way to deal with the fact that I'm crying and my nose is running,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel good. Now that doesn't mean you put the box of Kleenex in the
Yeah,
middle of the
first thing.
table, right? Like I always tell folks, if you have a room that you normally use for tougher conversations, always have a box of Kleenex in that room, either in the corner or inside a drawer or something. Like never let that box of Kleenex go unused.
Yeah.
If you're in a space where that isn't possible, they sell those little packets, right? I have walked into, especially during, I'll never forget, during COVID, I had a client that needed to lay off their entire staff. It was brutal. I think the owner cried more than anybody, right?
Yeah.
But that's where we were. And I'm headed there, and all of a sudden I realize they're doing this off-site. They had to meet off-site for COVID reasons, right? And I'm like, there's no way that off-site space is going to have a Kleenex. There's just not going to happen. And I'm going to have this whole room of like 20 people, and everybody's going to cry. I ran into Walgreens, and sure enough, like I had my pockets of my suit coat like stuffed with Kleenex.
Yeah.
So it's those little things, just kind of playing it out in your mind, and thinking about what could go wrong, and how do you prepare for it?
Is it best practice to have someone, to say a witness with you when you're terminating?
Typically prefer to do it that way, for two reasons. One, sometimes it just can, again, bring the temperature down in the room. Two, you do have somebody else there. Also security, right? Like somebody else is around. That's the other thing. Clear the table. That if there's a table between you and that person, clear the table. Especially if you have any reason to think there might be anger involved from the other person. I didn't do that once early in my career, and I got a stapler thrown at me. Thankfully I ducked really quickly, but it's those kinds of things. When people are mad, right, they lash out, and you just don't know what that will look like. So those kinds of things, remove big items so that can't happen. Make sure if you have reason to think that the person might be violent, make sure that other people, like you don't have a whole staff of people in the office and things like that. But yeah, somebody else with you. Don't bring somebody in if they're not in the appropriate position for it. I'd rather you do it alone than be like, I'm bringing in your peer to sit on your
Right, exactly.
termination. But if you have the option, yes, somebody coming in with you is important.
Yeah. And would you, if, say we have to let someone go and they're on shift for Friday morning, I imagine it's best practice to fire them at the beginning of their shift, not at the end.
It is. It is. I hate when people like, I'm going to make you work all day and then I'm going to tell you at the end of the day. So yeah, make sure for that. Also watch your patterns. I'm amazed at what people like think of, but like I had somebody who came to my team actually who said that at their previous role, every person who like what happened if you were getting fired was the boss invited you to lunch and then told you at lunch, and then you came back and your desk was cleaned out. So if the
Oh,
boss ever
God.
invited somebody to lunch, they were like,
Oh
oh
no.
man, I'm losing my
Death knell.
job. Some little things like when I was in banking, I used to show, like, I had somebody who like, oh, she's wearing the green suit. I was like, what? They're like, every time you wear that green suit, you fire people. I'm like, guys, I can't afford enough clothing for this, right? But sometimes we do have patterns that we don't realize, and just being conscious of that, always same time of day, that kind of thing. But yeah, to the extent that you cannot make somebody work all day and then let them go. And usually I suggest the way to think about it is, as you're planning it out, think about it in terms of if you were in that person's shoes, not what works best for you as the owner.
Yeah.
Terminating somebody should not be convenient for you.
And what do you do after the fact with your team? Talking about, staff culture and making sure that everybody's sort of on the same page after a termination. Are there things that you suggest?
Yeah, first of all, confidentiality matters, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of things you can't share.
Mm.
Also, people are watching how you react. So if you terminate somebody in the morning and then you're bopping around with a smile on your face all day,
Mhm.
does something, right? So you don't have to walk around crying, but you also don't need to, like, throw a luncheon for everybody. Typically, I recommend one of two approaches, and it kind of depends on the scenario and the situation. If it's something where, like, it's going to be a shock to the team, um, your best person or the person everybody loves does something totally bizarre, and you have to do an immediate termination. Um, then I suggest, you know, figure out first, do you have one or two key people that need to know first, and maybe do one-on-one meetings with them. I had one a couple of weeks ago where we did a termination and the person's best friend worked for the company. And in fact, like, this person had been with the company for like 2 or 3 years, and 6 months previously recruited her best friend to come work there. So it wasn't just a workplace friend. And the way we did that was, it was a reduction in force. So we needed to we told the employee, and then we immediately, before, like, we helped that employee get out of the office for the afternoon, and then we immediately met with the other team member and told her in private. So she had a chance to process first. And then we held the all team meeting to tell people what had happened.
Wow.
That's another place where, in general, people think to script sometimes. Here's what I'm going to say in the termination. They don't script what they're going to say in the team meeting. I would tell you that's probably even more important. The person you terminate never remembers what you said anyway, right?
Yeah.
They're in a fog. The people you tell afterwards remember what you
Mm.
said. So scripting that out, and really thinking about what's the message you want it to be, and how do you, again, leave that person, regardless of the circumstance, how do you leave that person with their dignity and respect?
Yeah. Is it important to have a team meeting after every termination?
Not necessarily.
Exciting.
Or throw a party, maybe?
Even funnier given the topic that we
I
were
know.
talking
Yeah.
about.
Yes, for those listening and
Yes,
not
do
watching, I
not do not
somehow
bring balloons to the team communication.
yes, I somehow triggered a Zoom reaction where balloons went up. So anyway, sorry about
I have
that.
had that happen on more than a few occasions. So thankfully,
That's
never.
funny.
Now I'm going to remember, like, turn off the reactions. I do terminations on Zoom quite
Oh
a
my
bit.
God.
Oh,
And
well, yeah, don't
now
do
I'm
that on
like,
accident.
ooh, new rule, turn off the reactions,
That's so
please.
funny.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
learn something
It's
new every day.
actually kind of becoming, in a lot of office spaces, it's becoming far more the norm. And I will tell you, there's some real benefits to it,
Yeah.
because now I don't have to figure out how to get you out of the office.
Mm.
Again, dignity and respect, the person can just shut their camera off,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I can tell you, I was laid off from a position for after a very long time with the company, and I
Yeah,
had to drive 45 minutes to that meeting.
yeah,
And I would have loved if it had just happened at the house or even,
yeah.
at the
Mhm.
I'm
studio.
always terrified of, like, you get the person out and then you're like, now you're driving a car? Like,
Yeah.
if you're
Right.
upset, that's not where I want you. So,
Mm-mm.
so yeah, it's actually, I had one where we purposely scheduled, it was a hybrid environment. And we purposely scheduled the termination for the gentleman's, work from home day. And he was like, did you do this on purpose because you didn't want to face me? And we said, no, actually, we did do this on purpose, but we did it because there was no reason to make
Yeah.
you drive into the office
Mm-hmm.
so that we can tell you you're terminated so you can drive back home. Like,
Yeah. And
that's
also,
insane.
if that would have been, if he would have driven into the office, he would have also had that to complain about. There is just no
Yes,
like,
yes.
this is just not a fun thing. I think
There,
people
yeah.
forget.
The first person that I ever had to let go, and I was a teenager back then, they stripped naked in the parking lot and set their uniform on fire. So you never know what kind of crazy is going to happen. And this was I looked at
Wow.
my boss and
Okay,
I was like, is
Jessica,
that
I'm putting
normal?
that
Do
down
people
as
do
like knock on wood. I have not had that one happen yet, but
I
wow.
wish I'd had that happen.
But that won't be happening if
Oh,
you're using Zoom. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about
right.
that.
Yeah, the feedback I have heard from folks, because I often, as the HR person, have reason to have follow-up conversations with somebody. They have a question, if there's a severance agreement or payroll or whatever. Often we say, just call me, I'll take care of that for you. And oftentimes when if we have to do it on Zoom, again, it doesn't make sense necessarily in the studio space. You wouldn't want to be like, hey, I know you're supposed to be here at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
today, but why don't you work from home? Because nobody works from home. But
Right.
but it's those kinds of things that just thinking differently about how you approach these conversations in a way that leaves that person with as much dignity and respect as possible, regardless of how bad the thing was that they did. It's it's really about what other people perceive, and the rest of your team will be paying attention to, even when you were at your most angry, did you handle yourself with professionalism? And that's when people are upset that sometimes people are upset that you let somebody go, but the fact that you handled it well and you had a plan and you spoke highly of people and you wished, like, you didn't say negative things about them and talk behind their back, like that's when it really makes a difference for your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of us are in smaller towns and,
Hmm.
if people talk.
Word
And so
gets
it's
out.
really important to do it right.
You don't know whose brother, sister, cousin, best friend somebody is, and boy, if you don't handle it well, it can
Hmm.
harm you, not just from a lawsuit perspective, but from a people perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is really hard. Like it takes practice. I think it's the hardest thing to not want to tell them how you're feeling and how this is impacting you, but it is a very direct conversation that's objective and supposed to be dignified, exactly like you said.
100%. There are a couple of really like obvious best practices that almost like are most commonly missed though. Couple of back to the planning part, two things you need to check. Is it this person's birthday? And is it
Oh,
their anniversary with the company? We do
oh,
not fire people on their birthday
Mhm.
or their anniversary with the company. Check for holidays, right? If it's, there's holidays that not like, if you may not celebrate Jewish holidays, but you don't terminate somebody on a Jewish holiday, even like, you
yeah.
never know. You may not know they're Jewish, so you got to be careful. Um, I had one when I was in corporate space. We planned, one of my peers planned out a delivery of a message to an entire department. They were relocating a department and they planned out and scheduled it all out. And they forgot that it was Bring Your Daughter to Work Day.
Oh my God.
Not a great plan. So
Wow.
those kinds of
This is the
things,
real
like,
world. Welcome.
yeah, just think about it. The one I was talking about a couple of weeks ago that we did, there we got all the way, thankfully we planned it out, right? We planned out all the cadence of the conversations, and then we're like, okay, so then this is how the termination is going to go, and then we're going to meet with the team. And they looked at it and went, oh, we have a team potluck scheduled. Like, we
Ugh,
probably don't want to tell people at the team potluck. Like, that
no.
probably isn't cool, right? So
Mm.
like, you get so focused on this that you miss the big picture. But I have had clients terminate they get to the termination meeting and they didn't look up the person's birthday, and you
Uh,
say, unfortunately we need to let you go today, blah blah blah, and they're like, wow, what a birthday present. You're like, oh,
oh my God.
missed it.
It
So
just,
those kinds
it's,
of little things that you just don't think about.
no, it's
Yeah.
amazing any of
I
us
closed
do
the store on
this.
April Fool's Day once, and that was a
Yeah.
conversation. Everyone was like, "So you're joking?" And I'm like, "No, why would I be
Mm,
joking?" Because it's April Fool's Day. No, we're closed. We're closed as of today. Sorry about that.
Uh,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, the context is key. That could have been a much easier conversation where I didn't have to, for 30 minutes, go, no, for real.
Yeah,
For real.
it's not
Yeah.
a joke. Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's in the details and you've got to think this through. And that's where just even having a sounding board to bounce it off of is somebody who's not in the moment having the issue who can help you think about these little nuances of, hey, by the way, don't forget that 2 months ago you told me Susie's best friend is this person, and you need to think about like how are you going to tell that person?
Yeah.
Um, because it's not easy and it's stressful. So owners are stressed too, and that's the hard part.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
true.
Well, as we kind of come to a close here, I have one very important question to ask, and I'm hoping the listeners will thank me. So bear with me while I get this out. We work in hot environments often with the kiln and summer, and we also employ a lot of different types of people. And we run up all the time on issues of staff smelling badly because maybe they
Mm.
are not deodorant wearers. I've
Mhm.
seen this question come across in the CCSA private group a lot. How do you handle the conversation of like, hey, we really enjoy you, but you smell bad. Please use some deodorant.
So first and foremost, because you work in environments where it's hot and those things are going to happen, 9 times out of 10, like maybe the person did wear deodorant in the morning, but by the afternoon, it's not working as well. Like we are human bodies that have reactions to things. So make it easy for people to like I don't know, have a spot where you have extra, spare
Yeah.
deodorant. There's lots of like lotion deodorants and so forth. So you're not having people share roll-ons and things like that, right? But have options available for people in some like in the bathroom cabinet or something nice.
Mhm.
That can help. And also just send the message of like, hey, keep these things in mind. So it's
Mhm.
an easy way to think about it. The other piece is this conversation, 9 times out of 10, is most difficult for the person who's having the conversation, not for the person who's on the
Mhm.
receiving end of it.
Absolutely.
So you kind of just have to get out of your own head.
Yeah.
You got to get out of your own way if it's a conversation, and also think about why are you having it, right? What's
Mhm.
the why that this matters? Is it impacting customers? Is it impacting other people?
But do you tell them that? Do you say we've had some complaints and you smell bad?
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and again,
Right.
we say, you know what? We know it's hot in here, right? Acknowledge, lead with grace. We realize it's hot. These things aren't always in our control. Unfortunately, I usually will say, it's come to my attention.
Mm.
That's different than my
People
clients
are talking.
complain to me. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's come to my attention that there may be some, we also say, we don't say we smell bad. We say there might be a hygiene challenge given the heat.
Oh God.
So
Yeah.
height, right? This is again where write it out, and this one don't type it out.
Hmm.
Actually handwrite it. Our brains and our fingers work together. We do a better job of thinking about our word choices when we write it out. And we go, ooh, yeah, that would make somebody bad. I'm not going to say that one, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we always scratch things out when we write, is our brains connect. So typically what I would do is sit down and say, you know what, I know this may be a difficult conversation. Recognize we work in really hot spaces, and sometimes this is something that's completely out of our control.
Mm.
It has come to my attention that there is a hygiene issue that is impacting our
Mm.
clients' experience here. I'd love to talk about like, are there, we may need you to take some steps to handle that.
Yeah.
Here are some of my recommendations.
Yeah.
Right. Like sometimes people just
Good to know.
Yeah.
they don't know that other people are picking up on it and nobody's ever told them, or somebody has told them and they have a medical condition that doesn't
Mhm.
doesn't like allow them to get rid of the problem. Like it's all of
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said.
Oh, this is good.
I'm so glad I don't have to
I
do
have
that.
one. I have one question for our listeners. So we're all going to convention, or a lot of us are. A lot of us are traveling out of state. Is there anything that we need to be thinking about when we're choosing to bring an employee with us?
100% there are. The biggest one is pay. So if you're
Mhm.
bringing an employee who is non-exempt, which means they're eligible for overtime, then you need to you need to pay them for their travel time. So, or any part of the event that they might attend that is mandatory, that's like an evening event outside of their normal hours. So, but the travel time is an important piece of it. So you really want to think about, there's all sorts of nuances to that. That could probably be 30 minutes in and of itself, but note that if you're traveling with somebody who is normally paid, that's required to be paid overtime, you've got to get that piece right. The second piece is have people's emergency contact information if they're traveling with you. Things happen, and you don't want to be out of town with somebody in a hotel who has an allergic reaction because the restaurant messed up and gave them shrimp, and you don't know their family's contact information.
Yeah. That's such an easy, smart thing that I
Right.
have just glossed over entirely.
Yeah.
And can I
So-
ask, when you talk about travel time, now let's say flights are involved and the flight is from, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Are you paying them from 1 to 5? Are you paying them for, you need to be there an hour and a half early and then,
Yeah, you need
what's
to
that?
pay them for the reasonable, what would be a normal reasonable time. It does make a difference if it's like within their normal working hours or extra
Sure.
hours. Like there's all sorts of nuances to it. But you need to make sure that you've paid them for the actual travel time. You don't have to pay them for the time where they're sitting in a hotel room at night, right? Because they're there for the next day, but travel time does count. And for example, if there's a mandatory event, everybody, if you have like my team's remote, so I bring everybody in, and we do one of the 3 nights, we do a mandatory, everybody has to participate in this, and for that night I have to pay any of my non-exempt folks.
Makes sense. And it seems like this is a really good example of why you may need someone like you, to call
I
and say,
will
I have
say
this
this
specific
tends to be
thing.
the most complicated because the way they've written the laws, like it's not, I've even Googled it a few times to be like, how would they answer the question?
Right,
And
right.
it's just not the cut and dry ones are easy, but the cut and dry ones are never the ones that you get. You get something super convoluted.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, that's probably with travel, probably the 2 most common. Keep in mind, right, if somebody gets injured at the event, it's work comp because they're there for work. Probably not if they're, it would be a gray area if they're at the bar in the evening and they, trip and fall. But, if they
Yeah.
fall, if there's a fun activity that everybody at the conference is getting involved with, everybody goes to play, I don't know, pickleball or something like that, and they get injured, could be work comp. It doesn't mean you don't take people though, right? You
Yeah.
just need to know the liability. The one thing I do usually think about for that perspective then is though whether people are driving or flying to an event. The reality is, right? Like when I had my team in April, one of my team members he lives in South Carolina, and he wanted to drive in for the event. He wanted to drive his camper in for the event and stay in his camper. And I'm like, I am not going to take, you have to be here for business. So his travel time would have been considered work related. And I'm like, there is no world in which I am going to like take the risk of incurring workers' comp and liability should he have an accident. Not to mention, I don't want something to happen to him. And
Sure. Yeah.
driving a camper to me was scarier, but more importantly, my work comp is not set up to cover that because it's not part of
Right.
his day job to do it. But boy, would it have been expensive had something happened.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So it's things like that just are out of the day to day that we need to think about ramifications of.
Thanks for listening. Des Toll here from Bisque Imports. We're proud to support the CCSA podcast and even prouder to support the amazing folks like you. Keep creating, keep growing, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Feel like a juggler at your ceramic studio? Between classes, bookings, and admin tasks, those pins keep flying. Let Occasion help you put down the act and get back to creating. Visit occasion.act to discover your peace of mind.
Yeehaw, studio owners! Saddle up for success at the 2025 CCSA Annual Convention, happening September 5th through the 8th in Denton, Texas. This year, we're bringing cowboy country theme to the heart of the fine arts, and you won't want to miss it. Get ready for an action-packed event featuring over 35 industry classes designed to boost your business, an exhibit hall filled with the latest and greatest from top suppliers, plus social events where you can connect with fellow studio owners. And don't forget the grand finale, a boot scooting gala and silent auction that'll have you dancing dancing the night away. So dust off your cowboy boots and join us for a weekend of learning, networking, and good old Texas-sized fun. This is an exclusive event you can't afford to miss. Head to ccsaonline.com to reserve your spot at the 2025 CCSA Annual Convention, and we'll see y'all in Denton.
Katie, this was great. I mean, I think we could probably ask you very specific questions all day long. But where can our listeners find you? How can they work with you? You know, this is kind of like where we want you to pitch what you got.
One of the options is we have a way for individuals to start receiving our newsletter on a regular basis. So our newsletter is not only, we have a quarterly, like all newsletter, but also tips that we send out regularly about HR and recruiting best practices. And so we'll have that available for people to subscribe to that so that you can get lots of good free information that on an ongoing basis. And also in that, we always advertise, I do webinars all of the time that are free access webinars. Anyone is always welcome to join. So if you wanted this conversation to keep going, know that there is plenty out there to join in on, including past recordings we've done with organizations. If somebody has a specific question that they want to get in touch with or talk to us about, they can always reach out to us directly. And for any time somebody attends one of my webinars or joins a podcast like this, I am always willing, if they reference this particular event, I offer a free HR strategy session with folks. So we'll get on, we'll talk about what challenges they'll have, usually spend about an hour understanding their business and learning about it. I'll answer any question they have specifically and kind of give them a lay of the land of over the next 1 to 3 years, here's what you need to think about from an HR side of the house. So that is always an option for folks as well. So again, if folks use that QR code or email us at hr@peoplesolutionscenter.com, we'll follow up and make sure that those things happen.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. You all have a wonderful day.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Glazed Over is brought to you by the CCSA, the Contemporary Ceramic Studios Association. Thank you to our moderators, Amy Williams and Jessica Cowan. Editing by Scott Lester. Executive production by Vicki DeWorth. Learn more at ccsaonline.com.